Chapter 13. I didn't wash my shirt after the drunk guy left. Instead, I draped it over the chair in my room. It was a reminder of what would happen any day, what could happen any day. And every morning I opened my eyes, I would look at it, at the spot where he had grabbed me, and I wondered how we could make Cala Vista safer. I came up with 3 possible ways. Install bulletproof glass up and down the front desk. That way, even if I buzzed in the wrong person, there would still be an additional layer of protection between me and the customer. 2. Install a security camera in the front office. It would be doubly great if the video feed went directly into a certain channel on all the motel TVs. That way, my parents could see what was going on at the front desk while they were cleaning each room and come down if I ever needed help. 3. Install a panic button right under the front desk to call the police. It would just be like a buzzer. All I'd have to do was press it and the police would come. Later that week, I told Mr. Yao about my ideas when he came in. He immediately shot them down. All that stuff costs money. You think money grows on trees? I checked at the library and bulletproof glass only costs $25. I told him. I glanced at Jason, who, as usual, came with his dad and, as usual, didn't say anything helpful. $25 per square foot. And that doesn't include the installation, Mr. Yao said. What about a security camera, I asked. That can't be that expensive. You could put it... No, Mr. Yao interrupted. Please, just hear me out, I said. The answer is no, Mr. Yao snapped. I looked over at my mom and my dad, and they just shot their heads. Let it go, Dad mouthed. He had dark circles under his eyes from checking customers in last night. Why don't we go outside? My parents suggested to Mr. Yao. Let us show you the new washing machine. Mr. Yao nodded and followed my parents out back. Jason stayed behind, fiddling with the restaurant menus. Quietly he muttered, I think the security camera's a good idea. I almost didn't hear him. What? I asked. The security cameras, I said. It's not a bad idea. I stared at him. Well, why didn't you say so? I asked him. He just shrugged. I know why. Because he was too chicken to stand up to his own dad. I shook my head at him. Coward. Mr. Yao came back and told Jason it was time to go. Jason hopped off the stool, took a few menus from my collection, and stuffed them into his pocket. I followed them out into the parking lot. Mr. Yao, I tried one last time. If you'll just go home and think about what I said, it really wouldn't cost much and it would make the motel so much safer. Mr. Yao stopped walking and he turned to me. You know the difference between a good employee and a bad employee? He asked, jabbing his finger into my chest in the exact same spot the drunk guy had grabbed me. I just shook my head. I didn't make a sound. It's not whether you're hardworking or even whether you're smart, he said, staring deep into my eyes. It's whether you know your place. And he and Jason piled into the car and drove away. I stood in the parking lot for a long, long time. The hot California sun blazed down on me, yet I felt no warmth. Chapter 14. What's wrong? Lupe asked me at recess the next day. All day I had been walking around with this humongous cloud over my head. The sadness must still be leaking out of my eyes because Lupe kept looking at me, and of course the more she looked at me, the more I wanted to tell her. But how? How could I tell her that some drunk guy grabbed me, clutched me with a fistful of my shirt, and screamed into my face, that the man that I work for didn't think my life was worth $25 per square foot? How could I tell Lupe all of that? Oh, come on, it can't be that bad, she said, which didn't make me feel better at all. It only made me feel mad because, really, she had no idea what I was talking about. As much as I liked Lupe, she was just in a different world. Her and her parents, her perfect parents, and her perfect dogs. It just wasn't fair. I stood up. I'm sorry. I just need to be alone right now, I told her, and I walked away. I wandered down the hall, and I ended up in an empty auditorium. There was a piano in front of me, so I went in and sat down on the bench. Back in China, I used to play a little with my cousins because a friend of my aunt was a teacher and gave us free lessons on Sundays. I had learned Beethoven, Bach, and some simple Mozart. Of course, I hadn't touched a piano ever since I had come here. Gently, I lifted up the cover. To my surprise, it wasn't locked. With a trembling finger, I pressed down on middle C. I closed my eyes, feeling the note. Oh, C, how I've missed you. I picked up my other hand and ran my fingers up and down the familiar black and white keys. Slowly, I began playing Fier Else. I thought I might have forgotten it. It had been 2 long years, but I still remembered it. The notes carried me far, far away. I felt weightless, soaring across an ocean of memories. I thought of my cousin Shen, how the two of us used to get all dressed up for our piano recitals, and me in a silk dress and he in an embroidered suit. We'd point at each other in our old-fashioned Chinese outfits and giggle, even though deep down inside we were both so proud to be wearing them. Then, as the curtain rose, he'd mouth, "You can do it. You can do it," we would say to each other with a flurry of excitement as we stepped out onto the stage. Closing my eyes, I could almost see Shen, and my fingertips could almost touch him. When I got to the dramatic section, fear poked in. This was the part that I always used to mess up. Why put a scary part in the middle of such a beautiful piece? I remember asking my piano teacher. Because life is scary sometimes, little one, he said. I was only 5 at the time, and I didn't quite understand. Now, when I played the dramatic section, my lip quivered. I felt a sob building up within inside me, and I thought about Mr. Yao and how he just took and took and took, and how he refused to spend $25 a square foot to protect us, even though $25 was nothing to him. It was probably what he paid for dinner. I thought about my father, robbed of sleep, jolted awake by customers night after night, and my mother, the way her eyes twitched at the supermarket checkout every time the cashier scanned a new item and the total price jumped, and thought about Hank and his saltine burgers, and Uncle Ming and the loan sharks, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my cheeks. As my feelings coursed through my fingers into that sad music, I suddenly heard the sound from behind me. Someone was standing in the audience listening. I instantly stopped playing and jumped up from the piano. I hugged myself with my arms like I was naked. "Hello?" I called. The small figure made its way up over to me. When I saw who it was, my stomach lurched. "What are you doing here?" I asked Jason. Jason ignored my question and asked, "Where'd you learn to play like that?" "I had a teacher in China," I said. What do you care?" "You learned to play like that in China?" he repeated. There was a flash of surprise in his eyes. I nodded. "But my father said there's nothing in China except piles of dirt and trash." "Your father's a liar," I said angrily. A typhoon ripped through me. My hands balled into a fist, and I prepared for battle. "He said you guys like to sit around and spit on the floor." "That's absurd," I explained. "It is true. None of you have any money?" he asked. That part, unfortunately, was true. My parents came to America with only $200 in their pocket. "How'd you learn to play the piano if you had no money?" Jason asked. For some reason, this infuriated me. "Why can't I learn piano?" I asked him. "What do you think, only rich people can get to do this kind of stuff?" Jason's face turned bright red. I just meant poor people can do stuff too," I shouted at him as I slammed the piano cover and I walked away.